Hello everyone, I'm Stepan Bouda and I'm Chief Innovations Officer in Sabris, a Czech Republic company. I actually also happen to be a diving instructor, so we can talk about incoming invoices and total automation of accounts payable, but we can also talk about things like dolphins and fish and sharks. So don't hesitate to question me throughout my session. I will focus on answering these questions at the end of my session. So what is the topic for today is the total automation of accounts payable, and why we believe it's pretty important. Well, the thing is that there is a lot of manual work connected to the incoming invoices processing, and when we are looking at the finance as such, there are lots of operations that are being done, and finance and especially finance managers have a lot of work to do when they are trying to just keep the lights on instead of driving the business innovation and focusing on strategic topics. So that's why we strongly believe that the total automation of incoming invoices really is a thing. I made a bit of a research on this topic, and I have two things to show you here. Well, one is about how the companies are handling the incoming invoices. This is a little bit older research. However, it's very interesting because you can compare your companies with these numbers that are presented. And what these numbers are trying to show is how many people you need for processing your invoice, where the bottom companies need one person for processing every about 5,600 invoices. The median is that one person is able to process about 9,300 invoices, but the best run companies are able to go even higher, and one FTE is able to take care of about 16,000 invoices, which is like triple to the bottom one. So try to think about where you are standing. Now on the right hand side you can see what is the cycle from receiving the invoice up until the moment where this invoice is paid. Well, walking through the corporates that we are implementing the invoice automation solutions into, well, and we did for more than 20 years now, I have to say that the situation is pretty similar everywhere. You as a supplier send the invoice and wait for the payment. Now the payment due date goes through and you don't have any money on your account. So you pick up the phone and call the accounting department of the company and ask where the invoice is, and they are trying to look it up, and they spend a lot of time searching it. It seems that there is about 2 weeks in average for the bottom companies to process every single invoice. So it takes about 2 weeks, and it doesn't matter what are the payment terms, to pay one invoice from receiving it up until the paying. Now, the medium companies are able to do that in 7 days, which is faster, but not that great. The top 25 companies in 2012, they were able to do that in 4 days. Now, what I want to focus on and what I would like to show you is how to do this in a couple of seconds, but let's not get too much forward. There is one more very interesting research that has been done in Bilentis. Bilentis is an analytical company that is looking at the market for the electronic invoices and electronic bills. Now, it's important to know that the electronic invoice, which can be some XML format invoice, I'm not talking about the PDF invoices that are being sent through email, but really the data of the invoice that many companies are trying to include into their legislations. So, for example, in Italy, we have Fattura Elettronica, which is the government-supported type of the invoice that is fully electronic and simplifies significantly the total automation of invoices. Now, in the European countries in the north, they are pretty far there with the setting up the standards for this electronic invoice. There are a few more. For example, Mexico, when you are creating an invoice in Mexico, what you have to do is you have to send it by email. The invoice has to be the PDF, but also you are forced, or you have to include this invoice as an XML format as well, which then simplifies significantly the processing of the invoice. So what we need to say here is that there are companies that are using these invoices, and there are countries that are forcing the companies to use electronic invoices. However, it's not like super widespread among the whole world yet. European Union has created a standard for electronic invoices. They are called UBL invoices. Now, every governmental body in Europe is forced to receive this type of invoice. So if you happen to be in European Union, or you are sending an invoice to some governmental body there, you can send them the invoice as some electronic format, and they are forced, or they have to process it. Now, I feel that there is a major thing, a major issue with better widespreading of the electronic invoices, and that's simple this. If you're a company which is sending invoices, you are not forced in any way to send the invoice in electronic format if you don't happen to sit in Hungary or Italy or other countries where this is forced by law. Now, the electronic invoices are super helpful for the receivers of the invoices, but the senders of the invoices don't care that much. And there are a few more things, or a few more challenges, we can say a few more issues that are connecting or that are connected to the total automation of the invoices. Let's take a look at them. First and foremost, the processing of the invoices as such, and it doesn't matter if it's electronic invoice or if it's a paper invoice or if it's some PDF invoice sent through email, usually still needs people. In some cases, there is about 15%, which is my long-term experience from the invoice automation. There is about 15% of the invoices that still need people to take care of. And this work that you need to do with the invoices is usually pretty boring, repeating low added value work. And now through COVID, we can see that many people need to take some days off. And I don't know how it looks like in your country, but in Czech Republic, there is more free places, free seats on the job market for the accounting people than the people who are looking for the work. So just the accountants are hard to find, and the accountants' work is the work that is like pretty repeated. So missing workers is definitely one of the things.
Another thing is that the classic processing of incoming invoices is pretty expensive and rather slow. If you look at the incoming invoices, so if the incoming invoices comes as a paper form, so the paper needs people and needs human hands that put them into the scanner and process the paper further. Even if the invoice comes in case of email, then also email needs a people who distribute it to another people. If you need to approve the invoice, if you are approving each and every invoice, and this is a normal situation in many companies, the approval of payment also needs the people. Also, other companies say that as accountant is responsible for posting the invoices, then every single invoice has to be checked by an accountant before it gets posted. So again, the posting needs people. the paper that you get, you usually have to store for quite a long time according to the law. So the paper needs a physical storage space, and physical storage space costs money. So you can see that the processing of the invoices takes many people and many hours to process each and every invoice in the classical way. So it takes a lot of time, and often you get into the late payments of the invoice. If you look at the repetitive work of the invoices, so there are about 50 different issues that every single invoice can have, no more and no less. And each of these issues has up to 4 different outcomes, no more and more, no more less. You either decide to pay the invoice, or you decide to reject the invoice, or you decide to adjust something in your system so the invoice can fit. So the processing of the invoices is a very, very repetitive thing. And there is not much of added value in the decisions whether this will be returned to the vendor or whether that will have to be posted anyway. And if these things are done by the people, if they are tired or if they are not focused, they sometimes make mistakes, which brings human problems and human errors into the invoice processing. So as the process is super repetitive, it's a great candidate for data collection and data analysis and looking at the bottlenecks. But that does not happen very often because it's a pretty cumbersome thing. And therefore the bottlenecks for you are very, very invisible. And the possibility to make process better and optimize it is quite limited. So you can see that there are a lot of challenges when we look at the classic invoice processing. Now let's take a look at something completely different.
How the best companies do that. I have an example of Skoda Auto here. Skoda Auto is a Czech Republic company. We implemented the invoice automation there about 10 years ago, and it's quite an old implementation, but today even the Czech Ministry of Finance is giving the example of Skoda Auto as the one which is very, very far in invoices automation. And why is that? The first and most important thing is that Skoda Auto agreed with most of their suppliers that they are sending their invoices in electronic format that has been defined by Skoda Auto, and actually that is coming from the standards of European Union invoices, which means that they don't need to take care of papers anymore. They don't need to take care of some PDF invoices, because simply the invoice that is being sent into Skoda Auto is already including all the data needed for the processing. Also, Skoda Auto is heavy material-based company, which means that most of these invoices are based on some material. And since Skoda Auto is having a standard purchase order process, so it means that before the invoice is issued, somebody is sending a purchase order with the list of all the materials that should be delivered into Skoda Auto. So whenever a supplier is issuing an invoice, it is an invoice that is based on the purchase order. Now, Skoda Auto is also using SAP as their ERP system, and they are able to track which materials have been delivered into this company. So they have a list of received goods for every purchase order, which in turn making sure that the invoice is aligned with what has been ordered and what has been delivered a breeze. Because when the company arrives into Skoda Auto automatically through an electronic channel, it immediately jumps into the SAP, into the ERP system, and every line item of the invoice is compared with the purchase order. So Skoda Auto is making sure that what has been ordered is really invoiced. So that's the check number one. And the check number two that is happening there is that since Skoda Auto knows which material has been delivered, because they are creating a receipt, a goods receipt in SAP for each and every item that has been received. So they know what has been delivered, and so they are able to do something we call a three-way match, a holy grail of invoice automation, to match what is on the invoice with the purchase order and to match what is on the purchase order is on the delivery. Because if you are sure that what you have ordered has been delivered, and if you are sure that what is invoiced has been ordered, then you don't need anyone to look at the invoice to make sure that is correct, and you are able to automatically post such an invoice, which means at the end that whenever Skoda Auto receives an invoice, in a couple of seconds it enters the SAP system, and in another couple of seconds it will go through all the automatic process of checking, three-way match with purchase order, and it is being posted. And that, my friends, is the ingredients of the total invoices automation. I've prepared for you this simplified list of processes which I would like to walk you through a little bit. So on the first step, you need to have an electronic invoice. That's the best way. Of course, it's not always possible. There are some possibilities which I'll be showing later about having some OCRs included, but the best ingredient for total automation is the invoice that is electronic. It can be some XML format, it can be UBL according to European Union. If you happen to have SAP, it can be some EDI or any other electronic invoice, because electronic invoice makes your life really, really, really simple. But some companies say, okay, so we are having electronic invoices, which means we can jump immediately to our ERP system and then it automatically posts. Well, no, because electronic invoice is an invoice that includes all the data and is very similar to the paper invoice. Maybe there are some mistakes on that invoice, even it's electronic. Maybe your company ID is wrong. Maybe it can be some duplicity because the company sent you electronic invoice and they happen to send you also paper invoice as a making sure that you really receive it. I witnessed a couple of companies doing this. So what you need to do after receiving such an invoice, you need to make sure that it's aligned to perform checks and making sure that it's aligned with your company policy. There are up to 100 different checks that can be happening with the invoice and that it's possible to automate. So having these automatic checks, you can make sure that that the invoice is okay and you can proceed to the next step, which is the three-way match, which I was talking about. And since it's very important to have it there, I will just repeat it. Three-way match means that you read the invoice information and compare it with your purchase orders, one order or multiple orders, depending if it's one invoice to many purchase orders or one invoice to one purchase order. It can also happen that the invoice is just a partial delivery, so they are invoicing you just part of the purchase order. The good automation system needs to take care of all these options and needs to match the line items of the invoice with the line items of the purchase order. And when doing this, they also need to look at what has really been delivered, what is in your stock, and making sure that what is invoiced is in your stock, and all the amounts and quantities on the invoice are aligned with your purchase order. And if so, then you are able to automatically post this invoice. And as this invoice is posted, depending on the configuration of your ERP system, it's ready for the payment run, which is usually happening semi-automatically. And after these steps, the invoice can be paid, which at the end means that such an invoice arrives in electronic format, jumps into your ERP system. The invoice automation software performs all the automatic checks. If everything is okay, and in about 85% it is going for the three-way match. And if the invoice is matching with the purchase order and you have the goods received, it is automatically posted. So there is like zero human interaction in this case, in this process. And you don't need anyone to double check something because the systems are today able to work for you actually. All the software robots, there in the invoice automation systems are able to do that. Well, this of course is the ideal case, and of course there are also some edge cases. What if the invoice has some problems? What if the invoice does not arrive in this electronic format, but it's still paper or PDF based? So I will quickly show you one of the or overview of the process of the product we are implementing probably most often to the companies that are looking for the invoice automation. I would like to show you the process of the solution called OpenText vendor invoice management that we use for the total automation. And on this example, I'd like to also demonstrate you what the advanced invoice automation systems need to take care of, so you can make sure that you get the best value for your money. So at the beginning, your supplier on the very left of this picture is sending you invoices in different formats. As you already know, the best thing to do is to receive these invoices in electronic format, which can be IDOC or XML. In Czech Republic, we have ISDoc. In Italy, they have Fattura Elettronica. In Switzerland, they have recently started using QR codes, which are also super good because all the data are in the QR codes. In Germany, they have Zugfert, and there are many other different types of electronic invoices that you can receive. However, you will definitely still be receiving the PDFs or even papers. So this total automation of the invoice system need to take care even with this kind of PDFs and papers. How to do that? Well, you need to include some kind of scanning of the papers or receiving the PDFs through emails. You need to make sure that such an invoice will be archived into some robust, trustful archive, usually having some advanced techniques for keeping the records of your invoices either forever or at least for as long as your legislation requires. In European Union, we are required to keep the invoice at least 10 years. So even the invoice comes in electronic format, you need to store it in some trusty archive that will take care of the things like long-term archiving. Now, after receiving, eventually scanning and archiving, if we have electronic invoice, then it just jumps into the ERP system. If it's some PDF or paper, we need to do the OCR. OCR stands for optical characters recognition, which are the tools that are able to look at the image of the invoice and read all the data that you need for further processing from there. Now, OCR is with us for many years now. For a long time, there was some steady evolution there, but about 2 or 3 years ago, the major vendors of the OCR systems came with something really interesting, which is utilizing machine learning techniques for the robotic process automation of the OCR. If I would simplify it, they are using some human feedback to teach the systems what should be recognized on the invoice and how, which at the end, to simplify it, means that the recognition success rate of the invoices has risen pretty significantly. And nowadays, even we have a paper or PDF-based invoice, the success rate of the recognition of these are like really, really high. 89–90% is no problem to achieve, and in some cases even higher. So we have data, and what to do next? Well, next is the verification and completion. This is already happening usually in your ERP system, or at least next to it, because your ERP system is a valuable source of the data, of the purchase orders, of the goods received and others. So such a system is doing all these automatic checks, like a duplicity check, check for the bank account number, whether the bank account number that is on the invoice is aligned with what you have in your master data in your ERP systems, and like many other automatic checks that don't need to be done by the humans. Of course, some of these checks might result into some inconsistency, some exception, something is not right. For example, the purchase order number on your invoice is not aligned in your list of purchase orders. Such a purchase order number does not exist. Or you have a possibility that this is some duplicity. Or maybe that the invoice amount is not equal or is not aligned with the purchase order amount. Maybe it's a little bit higher. So what to do? Well, that's an exception, and here and only here we need people to decide what to do. So in such a case, the system of the OpenText vendor invoice management system is sending these invoices into the people who are responsible for handling these things. So the accounts payable department will be responsible for handling issues with the invoices, so they receive any invoice related issues. Now the purchasing department is usually responsible for handling the purchase order issues. So in case the invoice has some purchase order related issue, it is sent to the purchasing department. If we have some problem with the goods received, it is being sent to the receivers. So the ideal system is sending this issue to the right people at the right time. Of course, sometimes you are not receiving an invoice that is based on the material, so you can't be sure that such an invoice is really in your, or the goods from that invoice is really in your stock. Well, for example, when you are ordering some services, right? So what to do with such an invoice? Well, you will need some simple approval of somebody who can confirm that the services on the invoice has really been delivered. Similar situation can happen, for example, in case of utility invoices, because utility invoices, if I will choose, for example, invoices for the mobile phone payments, you probably don't want every single person who has a mobile phone to confirm that they really have used the mobile phone as it's stated in the invoice. Usually this is a responsibility for one person in the company. Then this invoice should be sent to this person, and this single person, by clicking I accept, will basically confirm that the services that are invoiced have been delivered. So yes, there are some edge cases that need to be taken care of as well. So the automation of the invoices is not just using the material-based electronic invoices, but it's also able to handle paper invoices, is also able to handle invoices without purchase order, is able to handle invoices that don't expect any goods received. And after these couple of steps, again, what you want to do is you want this system to automatically post this invoice for you, so it is ready for the payment run, and you spend as few time as possible with this invoice. So to show you something, I have prepared here two examples which I would like to show you a little bit. Let me share my screen for you and show you two real life examples that I was recording in the system. The first example we have here is the XMLPO straight post. Now the XMLPO straight post is, I will just double check that you really see what I see, and yeah, cool. The XMLPO straight post is an example of a fully electronic invoice that is entering the company, and where we expect that is going to be automatically posted. Now, since this is fully automatic system, you don't expect any human interaction here. So what I have here is OpenText vendor invoice management cockpit of analytics. And in this analytical report, I can see a list of all the invoices that have been processed throughout the system. And what I'm doing here is I'm clicking the refresh button and waiting for the invoice to arrive, which will appear on the very top of the line. And after a couple of refreshes, let me pause it for a second, you can see that there has been registered a new document with the document ID 1366. Now it has just arrived, so the system does not know yet what the information there is. It has just been archived, and now the data are being extracted from this invoice automatically at the background. So after a second or two, you can already see that it has changed a little bit. Now we already know what's the company code ID. We already know what is the invoice number, what is the vendor, what is the amount, and some other information. And the system is right now doing all the automatic controls and checks and doing the three-way match. So after this, it will decide whether this invoice can be posted or not. So I am refreshing it a little bit more, and now you can see that the system has finished all the checks and controls, and it has already automatically created the material invoice in the ERP system in SAP. And after a couple of more seconds, also the FI document, the finance document arrives, which is posted automatically as well. And that's it. In a couple of seconds, the electronic invoice has been received, it has been processed, and it has been also posted. When I go to the details of the posted invoice, I will open the standard transaction in SAP for displaying the invoice. You can see the invoice here. And if I click the button to see if there are some attachments at this invoice, I can see that there is one attachment that when I open, then I can see this electronic invoice which has been received and which has been stored. Now, what the system is doing for the convenience of the people is it is also creating some human view of this XML technical invoice, so the people can see and read and understand what this electronic invoice includes. So really, this system is automatically posting the invoice, is attaching the invoice to the posted invoice, and not only that, the system is also creating something we call workflow history, and a kind of audit PDF file with a list of all the steps that have been done with the process. So with every single invoice, you can see when it was received, if there were some people involved in the receiving, if there was some approval, and what was really happening with this invoice throughout the whole process. So pretty nice, right? This was one example. And I have one more example here of the invoice that is a little bit different. This is one of the edge cases that I will walk you through. And such an invoice has been received via paper. And this invoice is not material based, which means we cannot automatically do the three-way match with such an invoice. What we need to do is we need to find somebody to confirm us that such an invoice can be posted without any problems, right? We do have the purchase order, but it's not a goods-based invoice. It's an invoice that is based on the services. So what we do here is we put the invoice to the scanner, click the button scan in the system of OpenText Vendor Invoice Management, and in a couple of seconds we can see that the invoice has been successfully scanned. We have the scanned image here. Of course, we can scan many invoices like this and prepare them for the processing. So after the scanning, what we do next is we will start the process of all these invoices in SAP. So I will choose here the type of the invoice and click Archive Document, which will take all the invoices from the scanner, will archive them into the OpenText archive, and will start processing them. By processing them, I mean that all these invoices are now being sent into the ERP system. And yes, again, you can see here that I am looking at the monitor of the invoice. You can see that the invoice has been registered already. All these automatic checks have been already done. There are no problems with the invoice, but you can see here that the invoice needs an approval, because it's a purchase order based invoice, but not a material one. It's a service-based invoice, so we need an approval. And we already see that the system has automatically identified who is responsible for approving this invoice. How is that? Well, whenever somebody orders something in SAP, you also enter who has ordered that thing. It's information that is available in the purchase order. So the system of OpenText reads this information from purchase order and is able to use it as a person who should approve the invoice. So now Phyllis Lindstrom, that's a person, the approver responsible for approving this invoice, has just received an email that she should approve an invoice. So she's opening her SAP Fiori application and logging in to see what's going on and what's the information that she should approve. Here we can see that there is invoice management approval. Then that there are about 22 invoices waiting for her approval. So she opens the inbox of invoices approval, and our invoice is right at the very end. She just clicks this button, and what we can see here, we have a list of all the data that have been automatically extracted from the invoice. We can see that the cost assignment is the consulting archive server, which are the services that are being invoiced. And as Phyllis Lindstrom, as a receiver, can confirm that these services really have been delivered. So whatever is invoiced is okay, and she can click the approve button. Eventually, she can enter some comments for the approval. Services delivered okay, no problem, and approved. Now, when we look back into our monitoring system, when we click the refresh button, we can see that the information about the invoice has been switched to posted. So the invoice is now posted in a very similar way as the previous one was, and we can open the posted invoice and take a look at it. Yes, everything is aligned, invoice is posted, waiting for the payment run. So really, in again couple of seconds, we have been able to successfully receive the invoice, read all the invoice data, make sure that that is okay. Even we have asked somebody for confirmation that this invoice is fine, and that's it. Well, that was pretty straightforward, right? And this is the way how I expect that the invoices should behave. Yeah. Now, if I will sum it up, what are the key benefits that the total automation of the invoices brings you? So, of course, first and foremost, there is a significant decrease of manual work. Really, there are lots of, you wouldn't believe it, but really, if you will take a very close look into the processing of the incoming invoices, the handling of the papers, manual scanning, manual reading the data, looking for the approvers, finding the right people. It's like a very expensive process. It doesn't really end up at accounting department, but it involves a lot of other departments as well. So that's the one thing. The second thing, if you would ever buy an invoice automation software, look for the invoice automation softwares that include the best practices right out of the box. So you don't need to explain to any vendor what you want from the system, but you expect the best practices that are already included in the system, and you will simply turn them on and start using them. And incoming invoices are pretty fast to deploy. So if you really have some quite out of the box solution, and very importantly, since the reduction of manual work is pretty significant, the return of investment that you put into the invoices is really fast, and the more invoices you have, the faster the return of investment will be. Right, so last slide of my presentation before we jump into the comments. I would be really happy to continue the discussion, because in 45 minutes we can't go deeper and I can't touch all your specific requirements. So please send me an email, or even better, connect with me on the LinkedIn, and I will be really happy to continue this discussion. And maybe if you have some questions or doubts, just drop me a line, and we can talk and we can look if the total automation of accounts payable is something that you can benefit from.